வணக்கம் இன்று Callum McRae சந்திச்சிருக்கிறோம் Today we are going to talk to Callum McRae, writer, journalist, filmmaker, director of featured film Killing Field, and also recently you must have seen on Sunday there is another film, a very shocking film being telecast on Channel 4, The No Fire Zone. Today he is here with us in studio. You don't need any introduction among the Tamils. You're almost a household name among the Tamils. Thanks for coming, Callum. Just first of all, about this latest film that you have done, it already have a significant impact. You know that people like Hugh Grant immediately, tweeting about, how he's still recovering from No Fire Zone, and so on. And many people commented on that, the impact it's already had. Why another film? How do you have because of new evidence emerged, and particularly how did you choose this particular time? Will you give us some information about that?
Well, it's the reason for this film. In a sense, this film is the summation of everything. We made the first 2 television programs in the Killing Field series, and these were the ones where, in a sense, we were investigating in the first stages of the investigation, and as we discovered what we discovered, we put it out. But after we'd made those 2 films, I think we just felt that there was so much evidence now, and there was more evidence coming all the time. But also those had been television programs, and we felt now was the time to bring it all together into what we saw as the definitive film of record, which brought all the new evidence together, and there's a lot of new evidence in this film, and combined it with the various bits that had been in the other films. Designed for an international audience, designed to be taken around the world, designed to be used in cinemas as well as on television. And so that was the thinking behind making this film.
Yeah, it's quite clear that it's very, very well crafted. But also give us some information about, because there's one of the accusation against you, I just wanted to talk about it a bit later on, is about the authenticity of this film. Just give us the kind of a professionalism that goes behind it in terms of verifying footages, and also in terms of professionals who are involved in that, and so on.
Yeah, well, when I first started this, we had a sort of mass of evidence, which was the footage that had been filmed inside the no-fire zones. But also the information was beginning to come out about some of the footage which had been shot by Sri Lankan armed forces themselves. So in a sense, there's 2 sets of evidence. There's the evidence which is filmed from within the no-fire zones, and then there's the very shocking evidence of the actual specific war crimes. The massacring of the civilians in the no-fire zones was, in a sense, the greatest of the crimes, because there were thousands and thousands who died. But there was something very stark about the footage which was filmed by the soldiers themselves of them committing atrocities. And that footage we have analysed. We've analysed everything very carefully, but that particularly carefully. What we've done with all that footage is we've had it analysed by a digital forensic analysis. Basically, this is a company which works for the British courts and various other institutions, evidential situations. And they take the footage and they analyse it minutely. They break it down frame by frame. They look for any signs of editing, any signs of manipulation. They also look for inconsistencies in the light. They also look for what it was filmed on. In many cases, they can actually work out what kind of telephone it was filmed on, which device it was filmed on, and then check whether that device is consistent with one that might be available at the time. Mm-hmm. And they also compared some of the images. So, one thing you would never do if you were trying to fake something is you would never film it from two different places, because that would certainly give it away. You would see inconsistencies. But they did all of this, and they reached the conclusion that there is nothing at all to suggest that this has been manipulated or edited. In other words, this is, as far as they can make out, real depiction of real events. However, we didn't leave it at that. We also got a forensic pathologist to look at it, and he examined he does work for the courts and internationally, actually, and he looked at the way, it's horrible truth, but, he looked at the way the bodies fell. He looked at the nature of the blood spatter, the nature of the injuries, to see if there was anything fake about it. And he reached a conclusion that there wasn't, that these were, I'm afraid to say, real executions in real time of real people. And of course, on top of that, the UN has also independently assessed it. So I'm afraid there is absolutely and they reached the same conclusion. So there really can be, horrible as it is, there can be no doubt that these are real, despite what the Sri Lankan government will tell you.
It is horrific, but at the same time, to an extent, the Tamils speaking world would like to see more of these coming out, because they've been crying out for this has happened. But these kind of films that you have done have actually given a certain voice to them. But having said that, the reason we're talking about this, the authenticity, is that within Sri Lanka, there is a massive attack on you by the government. The government itself made a film against your film last time, but also recently predicting what is going to happen now. The chief editor of The Nation, Melinda Saranvitana, for example, wrote a sarcastic piece on you. There are various things, I just picked one of them. And he says, it's fictionalizing the truth. The paint is painting the fiction as a fact. The various things. These are respected journalists in the country. And then they question your basic ethics of journalism, and then you're just sleepwalking, basically, and so on and so forth. So this is just one section, but the majority of these journalists who are somehow associated with the current Sri Lankan regime, but it is a personal attack against you. How do you face this?
It has been, frankly, quite astonishing. I mean, one of the things that I think they don't understand where I'm coming from. I think that they think I must be being paid by the Tigers, for example.
That's going to ask.
Even though, you know, in the film, I criticize the Tigers. I say the Tigers committed war crimes. I say they used child soldiers. I said that they prevented people leaving. And in a sense, I say the worst thing they did was they, I believe, betrayed the trust of the civilians who thought that they would protect them. And, you know, so that there is no way that I could be accused of being a supporter of the Tigers. But I am a journalist, and I have investigated it. The vast majority of deaths, the vast majority of crimes were committed by the Sri Lankan government, the vast majority. And that is just a fact which I have researched and I have investigated, and it's my job as a journalist to tell the truth. And I think that, you know, I can't afford to take this kind of thing too seriously. I certainly can't afford to take these people seriously as journalists. I mean, they say I'm not a journalist. I can stand up everything I've said. Everything, you know, the films I've made have been, government supporters have complained to our regulators here, the Ofcom, and they have investigated. There's been like over 100 complaints about this film from government supporters, accusing us of bias, inaccuracy, all the rest of it. And it's all been investigated by a regulator who is more than happy to find us guilty if we are guilty, and not a single complaint was upheld. So I find it astonishing that these people write things about me which are simply lies, and then accuse me of being a bad journalist. It's frankly astonishing, and it would be laughable if it wasn't so serious and the issues weren't so serious. To give you an example, the Daily News, which I believe is a government-owned newspaper in Sri Lanka, wrote a huge article describing describing things that had happened to me. Now, I'm used to them hurling insults at me. I'm used to them saying, oh, you're just a terrorist or whatever, laughable and absurd and demonstrably untrue though that is. But this was extraordinary. This was in a government newspaper, and it quoted from emails which it said I had been sent by the Tamil Tigers, who call me Mac. The only people who call me Mac are the Sri Lankan newspapers. It described a meeting I had with Adele Balasingham in Channel 4. Now, in my office in Channel 4, I don't have an office in Channel 4. I'm a freelance journalist who was hired by Channel 4 to make this film, and Channel 4 have been very good and very strong about it, but I don't have an office in Channel 4. It's ridiculous. And anyone who knows anything knows that's not true. I have never in my life met Adele Balasingham. I have certainly not planned a strategy with her and these mysterious LTTE people. But it's more than just misinformation or getting things wrong that they're saying about me or believing these bad things of me. This is actually clearly, completely invented material. It's emails which somebody has sat and invented. And that level of lying and distortion, you know, in an attempt to portray me as a bad journalist, is astonishing. Now, of course, it was anonymous, this article in the Daily News. It's a huge, big article, quoted regularly. I mean, there's a diplomat who used to be the president's media advisor called Bandula Jayasakara, and he keeps tweeting about this article and sending it to people. The article is such unbelievable and so demonstrably, obviously, such nonsense that I do find it quite astonishing. Sorry, it makes me get a bit worked up.
But that's true, actually, because the standard has gone down. Quite a lot of journalists, decent journalists, been expelled. or got out, managed to get out. And the journalism standard is gone down in the country itself, and it is partly a reflection of that, it looks like. But also you are facing problems not just in Sri Lanka but also in India. Been stopped for going there for a screening and so on. So why is that, and what is the reaction in India?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very surprised by India stopping me going there, and I search in vain for some kind of explanation. There are only two explanations that I can think of, and I very much hope that neither of those are true. The first explanation is that somehow, for some reason, India has been lent on. Large, big, huge India, with its traditions of democracy and freedom, has been lent on by a very small country called Sri Lanka, whose government is accused of war crimes. Now, if truly that has happened, and the Sri Lankan and the Indian government have kowtowed to pressure from the Sri Lankan government not to let me in, that is astonishingly depressing and a matter of huge concern, I would have thought, to me, but obviously also to a lot of Indians. So I hope that's not the explanation, but that's one of the possible explanations. The only other possible explanation is that the Indian government themselves want to shut me up. The Indian government themselves do not want my evidence, or not even my evidence, the evidence.
But particularly, why you? I mean, the question is, why you? I mean, you're a journalist, a very well-known journalist. You're open. You're not going to, go and do anything back of the government and so on. Particularly, what is the political behind? What do you think?
I am at an absolute loss. I don't know why they didn't let me in. I'm very surprised they didn't let me in. I hope that decision will be withdrawn. I find it depressing. I mean, I actually, I looked to India. I looked at India's tradition. I looked at the Gandhian foundations of India with the greatest of respect and admiration. I mean, who wouldn't, with any kind of commitment to truth and justice, admire how
but it is
India
also,
came about. But that seems to be such a betrayal of everything they stand for.
Yes, that is quite understandable. But also it's linked to feel like Choham, because of the Commonwealth heads of government meeting taking place in Sri Lanka. And the Indian government want to participate in it. And the movie that you made, the film that you made, kind of create a major obstacle. So Chidambaram commented on it, and various ministers have commented on it, and so on. So it has created quite a lot of problem. And if you go there, and it will create a media kind of a circus a little bit, and more pressure for the government, which they're probably trying to prevent it.
I mean, clearly they don't want to confront this issue, and that's why they don't want me there, because, to some extent, I mean, I am just a journalist, and people have to remember that I am just a journalist telling a story, which I have researched and which I know to be true. That's all I am. I'm not a political leader. I'm not a big commentator. I'm somebody who's trying to tell a story which I believe to be true. And they don't want to hear that story. And that, I think, is what's most depressing, is clearly they do not want to hear that story. But the point is that India cannot, I certainly would not, try and tell India what to do. It's not my job, and India would quite rightly tell me where to go if I did try to tell India what to do. But what India cannot afford to do is to close its eyes, close its ears, and not listen to the truth about what happened in Sri Lanka. That they have to confront. And they have to confront it because if that truth is not confronted, if the repression in the short term, then the repression will continue. In the long term, who knows what happens? Bloodshed, the violence might restart. India cannot stick its head in the sand or stick its fingers in its ears, or whatever analogy you want to use, and not confront the reality that is going on in its neighbour. It has to deal with it.
Unfortunately, telling the truth, there's a lot of journalists inside India itself having difficulty on this particular issue. We won't be the first one. But on the question of Shogun here also, I had an opportunity to interview Prime Minister yesterday. We would play that clip a little bit in a second. What is the position here now is that it also had an impact. Your film also had an impact here. I mean, David Cameron commented on that particular movie. I asked him about it, and because it's clearly shows the evidence of war crimes, and there is no reason for inaction. So let's play that clip a little bit, and then I'll